Okay, wonderful. So all those are here on time. Wonderful. Welcome to our final session, the fifth class of this first segment of the course. We've embarked on a wonderful journey together. It's been very insightful. Some people enjoyed some more than others of the questions and the answers, but overall, I've heard wonderful feedback from everyone, learning new things, gaining insight, and we're very, very thankful to God for making this happen. And it is Tuesday and it is raining, so we know classes tonight. And we have a little bit of a advertisement here. Risha wants to say something. Well, she's giving us the cry for the new year, which is what we're about to do, to blow the shofar. So we'll start off. She did the real version. The real version is a child's cry to God for New Year. We'll blow that in a moment. So just for the exciting new news is that after the holiday season, thank God it's going to be very busy. Just last night we had a challah bake for women, over 20 women outdoors. It was nice weather just before it rained. So the marathon has begun. We are going to resume learning this very textbook. You do not need to reapply or sign up or get a new book. You have your book. You don't need to pay more money. You are in for the next few sessions, which will be after the holidays. It's going to be tricky dates. Look at your email. It's the Thursday, October 20th. And you can join on Zoom if you're not here. And then the next 2 Wednesdays. So we're going to do 3 weeks, minimum of another 3 weeks of this. And then we have our regular courses that are called our flagship courses, which are going to be amazing. And I set forth in the email some of what we're going to be dealing with. The first one is very fascinating. It's kind of God 101 from the basics. It's got a he, a she, etc. From everything there is to know about God. It's going to be like this was 50 questions. It's going to be also a lot, I think 25 different elements, things that people love to ask. So without further ado, that is the ground rules. We're going to have a great time today. And hopefully my wife will address one of the local questions that came in over this past few weeks. So without further ado, I'm going to wish you a happy new year. We'll blow shofar and we're ready to roll on page, what did I say? 63, 62, 60, we'll be on 63. Shana Tova, a good year to all. Once again, I don't think we did it on the recording. I'd like to thank Ken for sponsoring tonight's class and all those who made it possible, Kathy, for the entire course. The shofar was just a pre-run. The shofar will ultimately be blown on Rosh Hashanah. That is the mitzvah. If you cannot attend services, we have our services outdoors here, weather permitting. And also we do tashlech at the crossings. Gorgeous. We've had every year wonderful turnouts. Anybody, even if you're going somewhere else, you can join us together as a community to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We have treats for everybody as well. There's Rosh Hashanah dinner. My wife is going to be sending out an email about all the going on of the new year. And please help us out, making it a little easier by using the link and filling out the form for what you want to attend. Okay, question on page 63, which is so funny because just before this conversation we're having now, I got a phone call from someone that's in this group who's not on yet. And he said, I asked him, how's the course going? And he said, it's very good, except when I get seasick. I said, how do you get seasick? He said, oh, Rabbi, you keep on swaying when you're talking. If anybody can relate to this, that is this question. I've been extra swaying right now just to get you into the seasick mode. Why do Jews sway when they pray? It sounds like a rhyme. It is a rhyme, but it's about, very often you'll see someone praying and he's swaying. Anybody know how to say that in Yiddish?
Shuckling.
Very good. Shuckling can mean to shake. Someone's going like this back and forth. They're praying to God. They have a siddur in hand. They have a talis on. And they're shaking. So what's the deal with the shaking? You know, you see someone speak, the mayor of the town, they're not going like this when they're talking, they just talk. Here I'm talking. So obviously there's the in-person crowd and there's people on Zoom, so I'm going back and forth. But even sometimes I'm swaying a little bit when I talk. And for some people, it's actually annoying, right? Because these guys getting seasick. I hope you don't get seasick, but why is it that Jews sway when they pray? And I want to say this question is specific because that's very much often where it's seen, but really it's also when you study Torah. Also, if you would go to a traditional yeshiva, rabbinical college, like where I went to study, we study in pairs, by the way. There is a lecture from a rabbi to the students, but most of the time the students learn in pairs. They prepare the piece of Talmud, they read it themselves, they go through it, they try it themselves, they try to figure it out, they got questions, they may ask the teacher, and then the teacher gives a class about it, and they review it, but it's study in pairs. Now watch this. In a typical college, you may study with a friend, but it's like library voices, you know? And, you know, you're quiet, you speak to each other. There's actually a rabbi who's also a doctor, not as a medical doctor, but he wrote his thesis about the pros of studying something, not only reviewing it once you have for a test for someone else, but the initial study with a partner and bounce off each other's thoughts, see what it means according to one and what it means to the other, and challenging each other. So that is another element of Jewish study, which is interesting. It's studied normally in pairs. The Talmud even says that unless you're alone on an island, you should be studying alone. You should be studying with someone else. You should always be studying with someone else. This is very, very high words that if someone purposely chooses to study alone. But the shuckling business, I'm glad you mentioned that word, is a swaying, a shaking, whatever you want to call it. The seasickness in the name of the fellow who mentioned it. So it's not only in prayer, it can be in Torah study. And sometimes even when the rabbi gives a speech, he's swaying a little. Could happen. So anybody have any thoughts on this? You've seen this happen before. Why do you think we sway when we pray? Anybody?
Well, I was told that it's supposed to be like a candle. It's supposed to light up the world, so it's supposed to imitate that.
That is amazing.
Light flickering.
Okay, you are on the ball. We'll get to that soon. Thank you, Ken. Anybody else?
Well, when I first came to Yom Kippur, sir, no, I wrote to shop. Yom Kippur. I think he met your brother or brother-in-law, whatever.
Brother-in-law, yeah.
He was, how tall he was. He reminded me of a giant candlestick.
Giant candlestick. Wow, that's great. Okay. Well, Sam, you want to mention something? Go for it.
Where it evolved from. No matter what you attach to it, this is how it evolved.
Okay, Sam's talking is how it evolved.
It's tough to stand still.
Okay.
All the time.
Okay, you're saying
start moving your body.
You gotta start moving your body. Okay, that could be. So I'm going to tell you a little story. Oh, you want to say something? Go for it.
I watched you on Facebook and you left the right. Is it ever back and forth?
Yes, very often actually during prayer. To be honest, there are certain prayers like the Amidah where you stand straight. No one's going like this during the Amidah because your feet are together anyway. There's a prayer that you're supposed to stand still with your feet together. During that prayer, which is the highlight of the service, in terms of holiness and connection with God, when we really ask God for what we need, then your feet are together. So it's very difficult to go like this, your feet are together. So then, but some people, even when their feet are not together, they go like this. But when my feet are apart, I go like this, generally. Okay, so good point. Now, you want to say something? Okay, we're having a lot of input tonight. Tonight's the last class. Everyone's got to say what they.
You want the comic version?
Comic version, go for it.
It's hard to shoot a moving
Target.
target.
Okay, there we go. Hard to shoot a moving target. Well, I hope that's not me. Good point. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a little story that I actually heard. This is not a joke, and that's gonna reflect text 10. Text 10, you may believe hard to believe, but this is gonna be ironic, Sam. It's not what you're expecting. And did anybody read text 10 yet? Well, let me tell you a story. This story happened in our times. there was a very wealthy Sephardic community, there is, in California and Los Angeles. And there was a Jew from Israel, a Yemenite Jew, very dark-skinned, Jews from Yemen, who was collecting money for orphans in Israel. Anyhow, long story short, is he goes to a synagogue and he asks people have to pray, you pray to God, why don't you give some charity to orphans? So this is what happens. There was one very wealthy person that he had a rule. He knew that sometimes people asking for money, he's not sure if they're really legit or not. So often these people come with actually letters signed by rabbis that they've been, kind of vetted, that they're actually collecting for a cause and not just saying they need money. Well, here's the point of the story. This guy, this wealthy man, had it one way. If you wanted to collect money from him after davening, you would sit the whole davening next to him, whole prayer service, and he would see if you're, are you really praying? Do you know how to read Hebrew? He would really, check you out. And so this Yemenite Jew shows up and he sits next to this wealthy man, and the entire service, he's holding the prayer book upside down. He's like, I call this bluff. This guy doesn't know how to read Hebrew. He's like holding it the wrong way. It's like if someone gave you something in hieroglyphics and you don't know what it looks like, so you can hold it this way, that way, you don't know. He says he called the guy's bluff. After the prayers, the guy says, listen, sir, I'm from Israel. I'd like to ask you to give you the opportunity to give tzedakah, to give charity to orphans in Israel, and this and this. He gives us a whole spiel. And the rich man says, man, listen, you know that you're a bluff. You don't know how to hold a siddur correctly. You don't know how to read Hebrew. And the guy says, no, that's how I read. He said, no. It's like holding an English book upside down. He says, you don't know. Try me out. He said, take out a siddur. And he read him upside down because there was such impoverished situations in Yemen that you had so scarce. We're not talking about 1,000 years. We're talking about the past 100 years that they did not have enough room for students to read around a book. They had multiple students, many students sharing a book. So this boy was taught how to read upside down. Okay, this sounds ridiculous. It's 1 in a million. The point is not about the charity collector. The point is about this is one of the reasons written by the Kuzari in text 10. Kuzari is written by a very, very, very important rabbi, one of the, what you call an ancient Torah Zionist, loved Israel, lived in Spain, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, a very famous poet. Now, Kuzari is a book he wrote, which is quite interesting. He wrote it, listen to this. I'm going to ask you to look at do you guys have the little clip notes about the author? Good. So, Ken, why don't you read about the author? Looking at the side of the page 63, where it's talking about Rabbi Yehuda Halevi.
Noted author, physician, and poet, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is best known as the author of the Kuzari, a philosophical work written in the form of a discussion between a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim before the king of the Khazars. In addition to the Kuzari, he wrote thousands of poems, of which only a few hundred survive today. So this book, Kuzari, does a very interesting thing to a lot of questions in Judaism. And he formed it as a conversation. We don't know if this conversation was actual or he wrote it in the style that it was a conversation between a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim. So he gives very interesting explanations for mitzvahs. Sometimes you want to have an interesting explanation, like how he proves that, how do we know that Mount Sinai actually happened? Fascinating stuff. Great book to read. I was told by my father about this. Now, we're told that this king, the book Kuzari is the king's name. He was the king of the Khazars. He was so impressed with this whole dialogue that he actually converted to Judaism. He was so impressed with this book. Anyhow, so he says what I just told you. Remember the guy from Yemen reading upside down? He says that's why they swayed. For more people to have an opportunity to look at the book. So I thought, even though I connect more with other texts, I thought, you got to read this. Come on. This is amazing. 1,000 years ago, you know how many, expensive, there was no printing presses. The Kuzari was written, as you see, he passed away in 1141. He was born in 1075.
there was no printing press. Every book was precious. So there wasn't enough books. So let's read it. Who would like to read? Who did not get a chance to read?
Quick comment. I know people who read upside down.
I know, but some people can read upside down, but they also need to read straight. They're not taught to read upside down. They have the ability to do also upside down. Here, the guy was just taught straight up, upside down. That's what he was taught because there wasn't enough room to look at the book. Who would like to read, who didn't have a chance to read? Did everyone online have a chance to read this? Okay, good. So Kathy, you're going to read the first one.
Okay,
Text 10.
you want me to read the Halevi part too?
No, we just read that. Go for it.
It often happened that many persons read from the same book at the same time. It was possible that 10 or more read from one volume, which is why our books were so large. Well, that's why. Okay. Each of these readers were thus obliged to bend down in his turn in order to read a passage and to turn back again. This resulted in a continual bending and sitting up while the book was lying on the ground. This was the original poets. Then, as is human nature, people adopted this as a habit upon observing and imitating others.
Okay, so we have here a little bit about human nature that pieces, I think everyone can relate to. Something spin out.
It's a very interesting
It is a very interesting.
and very honest.
I like this because this was quite interesting. I heard this as a kid, but I never really believed it was actually in a Torah book. But this is the Kuzari. Again, it's a fascinating book. For another time, we'll get back to it. We are now going on to our next text. Here, we're going a few hundred years later to the 14th century. A very important rabbi, Rabbi David ben Yosef Avudraham, you may have heard that name. Many Jewish customs, accepted by all Jews, are taken from this text. Text 11 is where he gives a deeper. The Kuzari was talking about kind of like almost like a practical situation. They had to turn everyone into swaying in order to read. But let's say you have one book and one guy, then it just became a whole habit. But what we're going to read next, text 11 says, no, there's something significant. Even if there's enough books, even if everyone has their own book, you don't need to get enough room to sway. And this all people sway when they pray. It's meaningful. There's significance. Okay, we'll ask someone on Zoom that didn't have a chance to read today so far, and that is Linda. Okay, it's two Lindas.
Hi. Oh,
Go for it. You go. You're ready to go.
11.
Correct. Page 64.
Oh. I'm on text 11 on 114. No wonder I.
No. We're on page 64.
Okay. It is customary to sway while reading the Torah. As it says, all of my limbs shall say, God, who is like you? We thereby testify that we, with all our limbs, are harmoniously praising the Creator.
So interesting. What does this text say? And we're going to take this a step at a time. The verse in Psalms written by King David says, well, all my limbs shall say, God, who is like you? Now, obviously, there's only one limb that speaks. That's your mouth. So what does it mean, all my limbs? So someone was, that's figurative. It means my whole being will praise God. But actually, there's a way to get all your limbs, your whole body involved in this, and that is by moving or swaying or shaking when you pray, because or study, because all your limbs are involved in it. So that's an interesting perspective. But what we really get out of here is extremely important. Prayer or study is not only an experience for the soul. It's not just a mental experience to connect with God. We want to infuse, this is the key change here. We want to infuse holiness in the body. The body should also have part of prayer. Your hands should be part of prayer. Your legs should be part of prayer. Your entire being should be part of prayer, not only as a mental endeavor, but your whole being. Even the physical is part of the prayer. So that is point 2. Now, text 3, we go back in our time machine in history to the Zohar. The Zohar was written way earlier. We're talking about the same time as the Talmud, pretty much 2,000 years ago. The Zohar talks exactly about this question. You think swaying is a new issue? Jews have been always swaying. And the Zohar says, this is the reason. And Ken, you got it. So you got to read today. You want to read it because you got it, or do you want to ask someone else to
Sure.
read it? Go for it. Ken, you got it. You win it.
Why is it that we sway to and fro when we study Torah? A habit that comes naturally to us, and we are unable to keep still. It is written, the soul of man is God's candle. When we utter even one word of Torah, the flame of the soul is kindled. We cannot keep still, but sway to and fro like the flame of a wick.
Amazing. So listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. We actually just before this had a very a nice dinner here together, and we watched some videos because today is the 5th class and we're celebrating everyone's journey so far, but also because today is the beginning, the birth, the day the soul of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, and the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the Chabad founder. They're both the same birthday. It's the 18th. Everyone knows in Judaism, 18th is a big deal. Chai, life in Elul, which is a very serious month. So it's the kind of like Elul represents a serious month, preparing for the new year, doing teshuvah, repenting. And yet we're told there has to be a special life force in Elul, special invigoration, special excitement in life. And this teaching from the Zohar is the predecessor of Hasidism. This idea here is not only are you going to also involve the other elements of your body, like we had in text 11, so all our limbs are praising God, but here it is that actually our soul is on fire, literally. The soul of the candle of God is called the soul of man. So it's funny, Ken was displaced from his seat. He usually sits somewhere else for the in-person crowd. And I said, hey, okay, it was back and forth. Mushka seat, his seat, took the seat. And he's the closest one to the candles that are still burning from our dinner. Look at that divine providence. So if you're looking at the candles, you can see that they're not still. There's constant movement in them. And that movement is the soul flickering. And when we pray, so this is true all the time. But when we pray, we're connecting to the soul more, so it kind of expresses itself. So when you see someone going like this, you just see a soul kind of moving. That's what's going on. Here's the interesting story that you will not find in this text. This is a story that I know from a woman. I was for 2 years stationed in Australia. The Chabad system is once you study for numerous years, before you get officially a rabbi, you get sent on a mission. Some people get sent in America, some people get sent 1 year, 2 years. I was sent on a 2-year mission to Australia. I was mainly in Melbourne. It's a very nice Jewish community. I visited Sydney, and my favorite part was there very little time, was my Passovers that I led community Seder in a place called Fremantle, which is near Perth. And believe it or not, I walked on Yom Tov, because we only had one Seder because the people didn't want a second Seder. We walked, did not ask the questions. Crazy story. From Fremantle to Perth. That's almost, again, miles, maybe close to 18 miles. It's very hot then. One of the Shabbos, it was Shabbos, couldn't even carry water. We had stops on the way. We had water stops. We arranged with stores. It was a fascinating time. But bottom line is, I was in the Indian Ocean there. It's a great time of Passover. Bottom line was, when I was there, I taught a boy bar mitzvah lessons. So listen to this story. His family, his father was not Jewish, his mother was Jewish, but his mother had drifted away, kind of assimilated into Australian outback. They lived 4 hours from Sydney. That's really in the boondocks, okay? The children went to a Catholic school, and one time, the student rabbis from Melbourne had time off. Had a short break, and they went to visit smaller towns, smaller villages, and this lady met them. And they were talking about different things with Judaism. And one of the rabbis, who I know till today, was swaying the whole time. He was talking like this and moving back and forth. And this woman was very, very interested. And she said, Rabbi, I don't know what you're talking about, but I have one question. Why do you keep on swaying? So he told her exactly this answer. He said to her, each of us possesses a godly soul, a holy soul, and the soul is like a flame, flaming fire. And when we get in touch with our soul, we start to reflect it. A little swaying goes on. So it's during prayer, during Torah study. It's not like when people eat, they're swaying back and forth. then just, they're sitting still. So this woman was so touched by it, she said, I want to learn more. And that eventually ended up, her sons were able to get bar mitzvah, and I was the teacher for them. And I flew out to their bar mitzvah. I was studying in Melbourne. I went out to Sydney. That was like closest Jewish community to where they lived. Anyhow, we've conquered and discussed why we sway when we pray. And next, this is going to be a biggie, and I'm very excited to be able to get to this point in our, because some people asked, I want to get to this question. And question on page 66 is, why do traditional synagogues have separate seating for men and women? You may know the word mechitza that's connected to this. Well, we're going to talk about this, and the next text is very interesting because you will not believe this. Today many people think it's just an Orthodox synagogue that has separate seating, but it's not like when other movements were formed. They said one of the changes will have mixed seating. And actually, the original, let's say even for the Reform movement, in Hamburg there was separate seating. May have other things evolved eventually to that, but actually the first to make family seating, as we'll see, and we'll see the reason why, which is quite interesting, was the church. So maybe you would think you're maybe just the Reform movement, but no, they did not introduce that. Now you'll see when this was made, it was not for women's rights necessarily, because this is not the 1960s. You will see, I'm gonna stop giving it away, but it's interesting to go back before we get into the Jewish tradition. It kind of was this norm for everybody until what we're going to talk about in text 13. I'm going to give, I'm going to read it. Let's see if we're going to do it this time. Beginning in the mid 18th century, church seating patterns began to change. So the mid 18th century, families at first were permission to sit together in church on a voluntary basis. And subsequently, family seating became the norm. Now, what was the reason? We'll see in a moment, but the family pew, when rapid and widespread acceptance in church circles and Americans, forgetting that there were other possibilities, came to believe that the family that prays together stays together. You've heard of that before, and it kind of evolved into this. You'll see why in a moment. The overwhelming move to adopt family seating stems from the great changes in the history of the family that have been detailed elsewhere. The growing differentiation between home and work. Think about it. 500 years ago, did people go to work? They left their home. They worked at home. They didn't go to work. There was no exit from the home. They may have gone into the field near their home to work. It's not like they went out to the office. How long ago do you think an office started? Give us an idea. That someone goes out to the office to work. If you make shoes, you make them in your basement or in your house or in your shed or whatever. No, he goes out to the shoe store. Or he goes out to your new job. He's going out. How long ago do you think that is? No, you never think of this.
100 years.
Right. I would say maybe before 100 years, but rough.
Way back.
Way back, okay. Why would people have to have another space? Why would they need that?
Because you got,
Late 1800s with the Industrial Revolution.
That's exactly when this is happening.
that would be the main thing, but before that, even like stonemason, people had to work forage,
Right.
go off to work.
When you go out to work, but you didn't have to have a separate shop. You just used your house. You didn't need an office. You may, if you're mining stone, you can't mine it in your backyard. You have to go to the mine. But you get my point.
See, let's go back to the slavery in Egypt.
Slavery in Egypt.
I don't think they worked at home. They were
Good. No, I'm not saying if a farmer has to work in his kitchen. Obviously, if he's growing fruit, he's going to go out to the field. It's not that. You get the point. You don't have to go. There's no one going to the office. Okay. So once Industrial Revolution, I like that, Maria. That's what started making differentiation between family and work. The growing differentiation between home and work saw families take on a new symbolic role, termed by the historian John Putnam, Demos, family as refuge. The image being that of family members clustering together for protection against the evils of anomic industrial society. Fear of family breakdown naturally led to a host of new rituals and forms, including the cult of, how do we pronounce the word, everyone? The domesticity. I like that. Okay, you guys get the point. Designed to strengthen the family against the menacing forces threatening to rend its writ as under. Bottom line is, the idea was this started this idea of emphasizing family, putting family together because they were worried the families were falling apart. Why? Because the families were always together, but now the father goes out to work. He's going out to the factory. Well, who does he meet at the factory? So to try to emphasize family, this is not a bad move. It's not a bad move, but this is a reason. It wasn't to make it equal for men or for women. It wasn't that. It was not the discussion. It was more to create family and put it on the forefront. Family is important, which is a very Jewish idea. But listen again, this is the reason why. The family pew is one of these new forms. By raising the family status over that of a single individual, and by symbolically linking family values to religious values, the family pew demonstrated, as separate seating did not, that the church stood behind the family structure 100%. We are not going to belabor the point because time is ticking, and I want to get through at least another question after this. This is the beginning of this discussion. So we see that it's a reaction to families falling apart. The church is putting families together or showing that they stand behind it. Now, quickly, the question on the bottom of page 67. The need to link family values to religious values is understandable and necessary. How could Jewish law be disposed to ignore this rationale? Why wouldn't Jewish law be in favor of family seating? So here we're going to take a very interesting look at this, and this begins text 14 in a moment. I'd like just to talk a little bit about synagogue versus the home. You're realizing again, the discussion was that the home was basically where everyone lived and everyone worked. And if you went out to the field, you went out to the field, but you didn't go, to the office for 7-8 hours a day. You were home. So the reaction to the issue of families falling apart, or you can imagine, I don't know, you guys can keep to your imagination what was going on. That's why they wanted to show that family structure is important and have family seating. Here comes the point. Here's an interesting question. What is the center of Jewish life? So we're going to ask an interesting question. So it's not in your textbook. You join me in the thought. If a community, a Jewish community, I think I mentioned this before. I did. You did mention this. Has limited funds. They're running a Jewish community. A few families get together. They want to make Jewish infrastructure for themselves. What is the first thing that the funds that get together should go for? So I gave you two options: a synagogue to pray in, which seems very important. There's Shabbos, there's holidays, there's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or a mikvah, which my wife was hopefully going to talk about if she decides to come, is the mainstay of the Jewish home. Okay, so I remember I led this on and said, oh, well, if he's asking the question, the money first goes to provide a mikvah, a kosher mikvah, which is integral for building a Jewish family, not a synagogue. The synagogue comes later. So here's the key. The center of Jewish life is not only a synagogue. I'm going to say it a little more drastically. It is not the synagogue. For Jewish life to persevere and to continue, it has to be in your home. The synagogue is an important place, but if it's at the home, then it will have continuity. The home is really the basis of where Judaism lives. How many hours are you in a synagogue? Even if you're very, very religious about going to synagogue, even on a daily basis, it's not a whole day. Where are you most of the day? Well, obviously there's maybe you're going to work, but you're not in a synagogue. Judaism has to be outside the synagogue in order for it to be, there's importance for synagogue. We're not saying a synagogue is not important. What we are saying is that in order for Judaism to have strength to continue, you need it at home. You need a strong Jewish life at home. So, surprisingly, does everyone know the story when Jacob went to sleep with a dream with a ladder? Jacob was running away from his brother who was trying to kill him, Esav. He went to sleep on a mountain. He gathered a bunch of rocks, not very comfortable, and he went to sleep. He had a dream, a ladder reaching the heavens, There was angels going up and down the ladder. You know the story. Later, Jacob took the stones, and he made a monument out of them. We're told later that from that very place, he actually slept where the temple would be built. So what do you see from this? This narrative is quite interesting. It's telling you kind of where did the very, very holiest temple start off as a place for a Jewish person to live. Literally where he went to sleep. So our tax 14, if anybody would like to read it, we'll give someone else. Linda Grimm, can you read tax 14? You have to unmute.
Okay. This is a mistake so often made by civilizations that pride themselves in building beautiful cathedrals and houses of God. They built, as the prophet Ezekiel 43:8 puts it, their doorsteps next to my doorstep. They visit God in his house, but forbid his entry into theirs, where his presence with his thoughts might certainly be inconvenient. That was not the thought when the first
Stop right there. This is a key element. He's saying something that sounds ironic, but you have to hear his point out. He's saying, it's wonderful to build houses for God, but don't divorce God from your own home. If you're a home, you can build wonderful big synagogues, but if your home is not a place where Judaism thrives, where religion thrives, that we're missing the point. You can't say, oh, we'll visit God in his house, but in our house, he's out. In fact, this is one of the main reasons why. So when I put up mezuzahs with people at home, I talk about this a lot. Mezuzah is exactly this. Mezuzah is saying, not only is God in the synagogue, but mezuzah says, we welcome God to our home.
Mhm.
And this is so important. I continue on.
Continue. That was not the thought with which the first foundation stone was laid for the first house of God. The sanctity of the home is the necessary condition for the sanctity of the house of God. The house of God is sanctified not because it is the place of which holiness is relegated, but because from there holiness is to flow out and penetrate the entire human sphere.
Beautiful. So there's a lot in this piece. Again, we are spending enough time, but not enough time with all these questions, but at least you're getting a picture of the importance of a Jewish home being the center of Judaism. And then the synagogue is a good place. But if even you can imagine if children said Judaism is only in a synagogue and not at home, then obviously it's not a real truth. The real truth is everywhere. Okay. Now, we're going to take text 15 in a moment, but this would start this discussion as the response of breaking of the family for, let's say, the church was to make family seating and make sure that people see a family together and that they're behind it is good. But in an ideal situation, Judaism should be at home, not only in synagogue, and the home should be strong. The home should be a place where it is, Judaism is also happening, and therefore, it's not only in the synagogue, and then if it's only in the synagogue, and then there becomes a question of why are we doing this together, which we're going to get to in C. But if your Judaism is only in a shul, it probably will not be a Judaism that lasts more than a few generations. It's very difficult to continue such a Judaism because it's not wholesome. It doesn't affect the way you go to bed, the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you play a game. Judaism that's in a home, in a wholesome way, will have a continuity. So now on page 68, the end of the day, we explained why, so to speak, the issue wouldn't be as strong in a traditional Jewish home where the home is together. But at the end of the day, what is it? Why isn't synagogue a place that would be a good idea? What can hurt? We'll have families sitting together, so we'll have another place where they're together. Not only in the home, they'll also be together in shul. So this is very interesting, okay? And we're going to read text 15, which is very short. It's from the Talmud. Who would like to read a short piece of Talmud? Daniel, why don't you take it away? Page 15. No, text 15.
When you pray, know before whom you stand.
That's it. So how does this deal with this? Now, here's a very interesting idea. Many shuls on the tender, which is where the Chazan stands, they have this engraved. Da lefnei miata omed. Know before whom you stand. And the Rebbe Rashab said the reason why in Chabad it's not on the, is that it shouldn't just be on the walls, it should be in your hearts and your minds. So the question is, there may be sometimes a social hall in a synagogue, but synagogue itself, is it a social hall or is it a place for a relationship with God? Here's a very interesting thing. The words used here is to know God. When it talks about intimacy, the very first time in the Torah between a man and a woman, Adam and Eve, it says that the words of the Torah are that Adam knew his wife and then they had a child. So the way he talks about, it's not just like knowing information, knowing the time, it means really knowing in the most deepest way, knowing one another. So Jewish intimacy doesn't only mean physical intimacy, it can mean on an emotional level to connect, and other levels, intellectual level to connect, but it does include the way the Torah, the very first time, the whole Torah talks about intimacy, it doesn't use a word that would maybe sound like it. It says Adam knew Eve. So here also, when we're talking to God, and the Torah is saying prayer is knowing God, it's intimacy with God. So obviously, it's self-understood that just like a couple, intimacy is a very private thing. Even if you have a great friend or your mother, they don't belong. It's between you and God. Anything that distracts that doesn't allow there to be true intimacy, true connection. So here would be the way that the reason why in the Jewish traditional synagogue, there isn't family seating, there's separation between men and women. And again, it goes back in many other movements. Even today, they may have it. Originally had it together, even in Hamburg, which was supposed to be the birth of the Reform movement, they originally had separate seating. Bottom line is, I'm not, today, you may have thought about this before, you may have an opinion about it. I at least want to present the halachic reasonings behind it, just so you have an understanding. Is there's a social hall, but a synagogue is not meant to be a social hall. And we know, and this is an important thing, that, so to speak, for men and women, if they're together, instead of someone praying, they can be thinking about their friends, their wife, their spouse. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just in the wrong place. It's, imagine if you are meeting, we just talked about the Queen, right? So I was in England for 2 years. I was there during, obviously, the most recent royal wedding, which you all know about. Then there was the previous royal wedding. How many years ago was that? I'll tell you, I was studying there. How many years ago?
It was in the 80s.
No. Not talking about, I'm talking about,
Meghan Markle and,
no, the one before.
Harry, was it Harry?
Yeah.
William and Kate, right? Something like that. Okay, so I'll tell you when it was, because I was there when it happened. I wasn't at the wedding. Was not invited. Wasn't a Jewish wedding. I was in, but it was a big deal because everything was closed. You know what I'm saying? The bank was closed, the post, everything was closed. Even the pharmacies were closed. Everything was closed. So I studied there, 2011, 2012. That's when it was. Okay, so but it is something interesting, and I'm not. This is not the point of the class. I'm not trying to advocate for anything. But she was in a very, very, I don't think, she had a very special way with people. I posted some of it on Facebook. She was very, very dignified, very understanding and accepting of different types of people. A very, very unique way. But anyhow, imagine you're meeting the Queen of England. There's all this protocol they go through before. There's all this protocol. Just to meet her for a few minutes, you sit through hours of protocol. Once she shakes your hand, that means your turn's up. When she does this, you come, you bow, all this stuff. Now, it's very nice. Imagine someone coming with his friend or his wife, and they're going like this. It's just the wrong place. It's a time that you're just with the Queen. That's what it is. So prayer, there is a social hall in the shul that is also a space, but prayer itself is meant to be focused between a person and the Almighty. Therefore, it's not. If anything is going to distract from it, then that's what would be something. So you'll find out soon. It's not just a mechitza. Watch out. Join me on page 69. You're not going to believe some of these laws have nothing to do with men and women. By the way, just so you know, a mechitza, just so this is the nature of mankind as well. You can have a mechitza where they make these really fancy ones, cost a lot of money. When we update our shul, we'll get one of these that have mirrors on one side and see-through glass on the other. That means the women can see the men, but the men basically are seeing a mirror again. That is because the main attraction is from the male to the female. That is distractive. That can cause thoughts that are not for the place of prayer. But the other way is fine. The other way is fine when we can look at men during prayer. It's not, the attraction is much less. Let's look at page 69. So here you're going to see, this has nothing to do with men and women. It's in general. Any distractions from prayer are not meant to be in a synagogue. Listen to this. Artwork. Okay? So you'll see synagogues may have artwork on the sides, but in the front, they're not meant to have artwork. Any designs, everyone sees this, prayer laws on page 69, figure 2.2. Any designs and artwork on a synagogue walls need to be placed above eye level. So if they are in the front, you got to have them higher up, not where people will directly see, so as not to distract congregants during prayer. Windows should be placed above eye level as well, for the same people are praying and looking at what's going on in the street, and there's a fire truck going by, and then they see what else is going on, and they're looking the whole prayer, they're outside. So very often in the synagogue, most of the windows will be on the sides of the shul, not on the front. The point is nothing to do with only mechitzas. It's a general thing to have concentration during prayer. The Talmud says during prayer, one's eyes should be directed downward. You shouldn't be looking all over the place. You should be focused in your center. Here's an interesting one. I said a mechitza can have a mirror for the men. That's only on the side, not towards the front. One should not pray facing the mirror. You're looking at yourself. You're looking how you look, how you don't look, or you got to get a haircut or this or that. It's not. You're praying to God. Last but not least, though normally one may eat before prayers, one may eat prior to prayer. Everyone's hunger. Sorry, I read that incorrectly. This last line emphasizes and highlights the importance of intention, which is in Hebrew kavana, focus during prayer. Though normally one may not eat before morning prayers. It means the first thing you do is you pray. You eat before. Okay, let's make this very clear. In Code of Jewish Law, which we're reading, the Shulchan Aruch, says that you're not allowed to eat before prayer, but if it will enhance someone's kavana, concentration, focus during prayer, if the whole prayer is to be busy thinking about the food, he's so hungry, so obviously in Kippur you don't eat, but in a general service. So then it's important, he should eat a little bit before prayer. I'm not talking about a whole meal with this, a lox sandwich. I'm talking about, something, fruit, something healthy, maybe not so healthy, a little cheesecake, you find out what you like for breakfast. And the point is, I've read this like 4 times and I constantly read it wrong. Bottom line is, generally you're not meant to eat before prayer, but if it will enhance your concentration, because you're not going to be wondering and thinking of your belly the whole time during prayer, your mind is elsewhere. The point of all these laws is your mind shouldn't be elsewhere. It's time to be intimate with God. You're talking to God, you're asking God for what you need, you're connecting with God, and therefore, this is just showing you in general. It has nothing to do with men or women being more or worse. This is the reasons behind it in Jewish prayer. Now, yes, please.
So, is that the same basis why women don't lead the prayers in Orthodox?
Okay, very good. That's a very good question. That's a very good question. That is related, but not fully. So it's related, but I would say I don't know if there is another why. You can go through every one of them yet. He's asking a question not just about terms of separation of seating, but in all terms of leading the prayers. The short version to that is that come to a Jewish home, the women lead the home. The whole idea of a synagogue is actually is I think we're gonna talk about it another time when we get to a question about minyan maybe, but why we need 10 for minyan, because it's gonna, look, it's a good point. It's related, I see why it's related, but I don't want to get into that because I think I'm gonna spill into something else, and I at least want to go to one more question. Okay, I think we've dealt with this. Let's do one more question. I think this is a good way to end off, of course, because it's a very important question. And we're not going to do justice literally to this, but it's an important question. So question on page 70 is, why is Israel important to the Jews? So how do you take this? Let's hear from the crowd. Why do you think Israel is important to the Jews? Why do you think? Give me one moment. Let's ask my wife if she's going to talk. This is our last session. Remember, it's not our last session. For a while, it's our last session. So I want to be able to, if she wants to share about it, give me a moment, okay? Okay, my wife is going to come. She's going to address not just the text, but the general concept. One of the things we didn't have a chance to read about, and some people asked about it, was about just the basics of what a mikveh is. And I think she's most qualified to answer this question. So, page 53, we're not going to read through all the details, but she's going to give a general page 53, and then it goes to page 57, continues there. Both were two questions related to what a mikveh is. And here she is. So you'll have to give us a little bit of bonus points for today. You have to give us a few more minutes because we'll see how much time we have after she finishes, and we'll see if we'll do the next question.
Okay. Okay, so I think the question is, what is a mikvah? And I'll give you the best answer that I could. I'm kind of doing this on the top of my head. But what a mikvah is it's actually, now these mikvahs are very beautiful. Not a pool, an area of water that's connected to a spring of water that actually comes from rainwater. So that's why mikvahs are a little complicated, because you can't just take a pool and fill it up with the hose and have a mikvah. It has a lot of details about it. And mikvahs nowadays are very gorgeous. They look like a spa. Like if anyone here ever been to a mikvah? Okay, you've been to one. Recently they built a mikvah in Brooklyn, Rye Grove, which I walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, it's really gorgeous with like chandeliers and the newest. So mikvahs are beautiful. And the concept of mikvah is that it's a purification. It's water that's not just for, going, just washing us up, but it's something spiritual to it. And water in Judaism is a lot. It represents a lot. Water is a source of life. And when we immerse ourselves in water, we're kind of letting go and like letting ourselves be surrounded by something higher than ourselves, which is what the concept of mikvah is. And mikvah is primarily used in marriage for women, although men can also use it. And it's around the women's cycle. And the concept is that when you're in a marriage, you always want to remember that it's not just you and your spouse. You've got a higher power. There's something above you. And we want to bring that into our relationship, because when we have a higher power, I think I mentioned this last time I was speaking, it really brings a totally new aspect to how you relate to each other. Because sometimes, life has ups and downs and things happen and we get upset. And when it's just between you and him, and you can, we can say, okay, today this, tomorrow that. But when you have something higher that brings you together, it gives us stability and something amazing that it does to marriage. That's what mikvah is. it's bringing that higher, the realization that it's not just you and not just me, it's us together with Hashem, with God. And
You did a good job. Thank you.
I did.
You have
Any other questions, anyone?
I mean, is it, might sound really, strange, but, I hear that, some women, when they're about to marry an Orthodox Jew, they're not Orthodox, they have to step into a font, without any clothes on.
Let me address the issue. What were your questions about no clothes? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so when you go into the
It's got nothing
mikvah,
to do with only marriage. No.
yeah, in general, the concept of mikvah is that it has to surround you completely. So it has to be totally just you and the water, nothing in between.
Why would Hannah, why would a man go to the mikvah?
That's a very good question. So first of all, the biblical, like the actual mitzvah of mikvah is for women. Men would go for mitzvah, it's more of a custom. And the reason a man would want to go to mikvah is because, let's say it's a special day, a holiday coming up, or let's say Yom, for sure Yom Kippur, or in Hasidic tradition, even more often, some men go every morning. It's to have this spiritual preparation to begin their day in servicing of God, and especially if it would be like a special day that they would want to tap into that spiritual energy. So it's not the same. It's not like for women, it's like it's an actual mitzvah. For men, it's more of a custom, but it's an extra spiritual preparation, immersion to have that extra connection.
Is there somebody watching, and how long do you stay in it? I mean, is there a
But it's just in and out. You don't have to. There's no limit of time, and you do need someone to watch you, just because we want to make sure you're completely immersed. And a lot, especially if you have long hair, you can't know that when you're in the mikvah if you're completely immersed. But the mikvah attendants are extremely sensitive about it, and they've become even more. They're women, yes. Only women it's only allowed to be women for women, and they have their towel and everything covered until you're under the water, just to make sure you're completely immersed. And just 1 second, and then there's a beautiful blessing that you say, and it's like a time for prayer. It's a time for connection.
Do you want to explain a little bit when?
Okay, so my husband's asking when do you go to mikvah? So it's around your cycle. So let's say, and when a woman menstruates, there's a period of separation between her and her husband. And after she has 7 days of a process of preparation to go to the mikvah. I'm not going to go into any detail. If anyone is interested in any more questions, I'm very happy. I've actually studied mikvah recently with a local woman, and she went to the mikvah for her first time, and it was a very special moment for her. And if you're interested in just visiting the mikvah, this is an offer for women only. Our mikvah in Albany is for women only. I'll be very happy to bring you by. It is very beautiful. Women, you go to mikvah around your cycle. So after you have your period, and then you wait 7-day preparation period, that would be when you would go to mikvah after a process of like a time alone spa process, where you just completely relax and take care of everything that you get to do once a month.
So there's no mikvah for men in Albany? Not that I want to use one, but.
Why don't I explain that?
Okay.
Daniel one.
What? Okay. One more thing I had to add. One more thing I wanted to say that we were talking about before. What mikvah adds specifically to a marriage is that there's this 2 week. It could be less than 2 weeks, and I'm not going to go into so many details. There's this time period during the time between a woman has a period until you go to mikvah. There's a time where there's no physical contact between you and your spouse, which sounds like, oh my gosh, that's a lot, right? It sounds like a lot to handle. But what that does is that literally every time you go to mikvah, it's like you have this special excitement and this special reconnection, because it's not like every single day you're not always available, and you have this countdown that you and your husband are doing together as a couple. And during that time, you also are forced to talk and connect in different ways. Like usually, come home, you have a hug and everything's perfectly settled, but you don't have that option anymore. It forces you to connect in a different type of way, which is really special. And it also brings that, new spark, new excitement to your marriage. So it's never boring, because it's never, you have these times on, times off.
Okay, I'd just like to have one question. Like, what if you're postmenopausal, no longer perioding?
Okay, very good question. So the woman I was speaking with actually was postmenopause. And first of all, mikvah only applies to a Jewish woman who is married to a Jewish man. So that's specifically mikvah in as opposed to your cycle. There is an option for some woman who's never been to mikvah would like to have this experience. There's a time of year like Yom Kippur where anyone can go to mikvah, like it's a special day and special day to tap into holiness. But if you're postmenopause and you're still married and you would like to have a to go to mikvah, so there's a one-time opportunity that you can go. And what's amazing about going to mikvah one time is that you kind of, it's like retroactive. So it's like, if you've never been to mikvah. Okay. I'm done.
You want to discuss this more? We're running out of time. So
Okay.
you're going to, anybody has further questions about this can ask my wife. Ken asked about men. So before COVID, there was a joint effort that men had basically mixed for women is at night, and for men, they don't do it at night, it's in the day. So there was a way to kind of switch it off. But since COVID, there isn't. But I said there's Hudson River. I'm joking around. But bottom line is no real option yet. Maybe soon. But I will say, very important is my wife mentioned and did a great job. So thank you to her. I don't know if we should continue with the next question because it's a big question. I think we're going to stop here. But I just want to end off just practically speaking in terms of what nowadays it's women biblically and men is a custom. However, in temple times, if a man came in contact with a dead body, went to a funeral, there would be ritual immersion that would be also an obligation. It wasn't just a custom. So it's not only for women, it would be for men also, but practically until Mashiach comes, in our times, it's mostly a woman real biblical obligation as opposed to a man. At this point, we're going to say thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to those who are in person who braved the weather many times on Tuesdays. Thank you for those who helped sponsor courses and classes. And I want to say it was a pleasure talking to you all. We are covering a lot of different subjects. So today we covered, what was the first thing we talked about? Anybody can remember? Swaying, seasickness. Number 2 was about, we just spoke.
Between men and women. It said that.
Okay, why traditional synagogues would have a separate seating. And then our third subject was, I was hoping to end up about Israel. We'll have to save it for best for next time. But I hope this was insightful. You gained insight in different Jewish practices and hope you gained along the way. I did certainly while preparing this. Before we end off this type of section, so instead of continuing on and going over time, I'm going to ask everyone, so you're going to give time to think. If everyone could think of what was their favorite, not to speak an elaboration, not to say why it was their favorite, just what was their favorite question that we discussed in the past 5 weeks. So I'm going to give you just a moment to think about it. What was your favorite question? It could be today, it could be the first, it could be the second week. And I want to thank everyone for joining. And remember, you are invited without new payments, without new signups. Whoever was in this course, we will open up to others that want to join as well. But that will begin on, as I wrote in the email, October 20th, which is a Thursday. We'll do it for 3 weeks because then we have a regular course that begins. We're having a lot. If you look through, you have the books, you get to see some of the questions. Some of the biggies you haven't yet done. It's not like we've conquered all of it. We've conquered a good chunk. We did a good time with the time we had. So without further ado, I'm going to ask everyone we'll start with those who are on Zoom, to unmute, and wishing you a happy, sweet new year to one and all. Join us for Rosh Hashanah. We have a lot of wonderful programs. We'll send out an email shortly about different services we have outdoors. Rosh Hashanah in the park, Rosh Hashanah dinner here. It's going to be very tasty, very kosher, very nice. If it's nice, we may do it outdoors. Also, Sukkot, here's my highlight. Get outside in the sukkah. So you'll find out more about what we're doing for the holiday season. You're welcome to come. Without further ado, those who are on Zoom, let us hear your favorite question. Okay, Piper, you're first. Go for it.
It was about the yahrzeit candle.
Good.
Because I light it all the time and I was always wondering why. So
Right. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Maria, Linda.
I like-
For me, go ahead.
I like the one about the Yorkshire candle also.
Okay, we have a favorite so far. I didn't go through the slideshow, but that will do that another time. Okay. Linda Grimm.
I think the survival, the questions about survival and how did Jews survive.
Good. And Maria?
The question about the Star of David, and I'm still not really sure about the survival question. So we have more questions about that.
Okay, good. Thank you. John, would you like to say your favorite question? You're muted, so you have to unmute. I'm sorry for not sharing the screen.
My favorite was why are there so many rules?
Good. Okay, now that we went, you guys, please listen in. You guys listen to everyone else. We're going to try to turn the camera around here. I'm going to, yeah, we're going to just do it like this. Okay, who wants to go first from those who are in person today? Okay, go for it, Daniel.
The Star of David.
Star of David.
And the separation between men and women in the synagogue.
Interesting, very good. Pat, I'm just going to go in order, so.
The candle today, flickering, so sway.
Swaying.
And then the candle.
Okay, the Yahrzeit candle. Good. Bill, what was your favorite?
Well, my favorite was about prayer, for sure.
Beautiful, thank you. Marilyn,
Star.
I knew that one. Marilyn is going to Israel soon. She's going to buy some more Jewish stars. Sam, what was your favorite?
I didn't hear the one about the star.
Star means a Jewish star. Okay, we'll have to fill you in later.
But the one that was obvious to me, where you talked about it, main reason why women and men are separate, distraction, one word.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, you're next. What was your favorite question?
Oh, about why miracles don't happen like that.
Oh, that's a first. I remember that one. I like that one also. And Kathy, what's your favorite?
I don't know. I didn't have a favorite. It was all very.
Okay, good. You can let us know.
Yeah, I really didn't have a favorite. Maybe the Yahrzeit because of my husband.
That's right. You had a little Yahrzeit miracle candle.
Yeah, I did.
Our best for last.
Sound very interesting.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
You can tell me.
Yeah, we told them when it happened.
Oh, okay.
Cammy, what about you?
I think I'll go with the survival of Jewish people. I think there are different perspectives on that. We probably didn't get into it. But I think that's a really interesting.
Great. So I think, do I get to choose my favorite question? So to be honest, in terms of learning something new for me was the Star of David. I did not know enough about that before preparing this, but every one of these questions I did like. But the miracles one, I'm going to be on with Michelle about actually. I love that one because it's such a different perspective. You know, we always wish there were miracles. And we're like, oh, if there only were miracles, everything's, if only, you know. And what we were taught here is miracles are not the way God wants to run the world. He wants to run it naturally. He broadcasts, he sends out messages, and makes a statement once with a miracle, and that is meant to keep the world at ease and then learn the lessons from it constantly for generations to come. Yes.
Go on, continue.
I'm finishing up because I want to end on time-ish. We did a great job. I want to tell you a little bit of the difference in these classes and these classes. As long as we continue them throughout the year, they'll be the same thing. It'll be an hour the same way. Probably the beginning will have one of the classes of the session we'll do a separate for, and not all of them. But the following classes are, you have to sign up anew for them. It's a different course. It's a very good course. We had last time, we had Outsmarting Anti-Semitism last year. We had something called Meditation from Sinai. And what was our third one about? Beyond Right. You were there. They were different. I'm going to try, for those who were there at them, here we really try to stick to an hour. And I'm going to try, I'm being very honest with everybody here, being that they're not accredited this time, so I can kind of go on it a little different. I will try to keep them shorter. They were generally an hour and 20 minutes. The previous class, the other course. I'm going to try to cut it down a little bit. But here it's very easy because I just can decide not to do a question and do it at a later time. There, the course kind of keeps going for 6 weeks. So some courses are 6 weeks. In the next upcoming year means between once the Jewish holidays are over, so basically starting November. And there'll be a winter, fall course, then there'll be a winter course, and then there'll be a spring course. The spring course is actually about very interesting things in Judaism. It's only a 4-week course. It's about dreams, superstition, very interesting stuff. So without further ado, good night. Thank you for joining. This was great. We got to hear everybody's favorites. And I hope you will join us for when we resume. You can do it on Zoom or in person. Our first class, as we resume, won't be only on Zoom, we'll be in person. We'll have dinner in person. That'll be October 20th, Thursday.
It's continuation of this.
Continuation of this. We'll start. We know the question. Page 70. Why is Israel important to the Jews? Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have another question.